She tried to sell her memories for food, until a human said, "Keep them." On the dusty, polluted streets of Nolar 6, a forgotten mining colony far from the center of civilized space, the sun never fully rose, casting long shadows across the crumbling buildings and broken neon signs that flickered weakly in the ever-present haze. Among the crowd shuffled a small alien girl named Kari, her thin frame wrapped in tattered cloth, her large dark eyes scanning the desperate faces around her. She had no home, no family, and no memories worth keeping. At least that's what she believed. People here didn't just trade goods or food. They traded memories, captured in small crystalline devices called mind shards. Memories of happiness, pain, victory, loss, all could be bought or sold for the right price. But Kari had only one memory left, the one that kept her alive, the gentle voice of her mother singing an old lullaby. It was precious, more valuable than all the credit she could hope to earn. Hunger gnawed at her belly, and cold bit through her ragged clothes, but desperation pushed her forward to the shadowed stalls of the black market, where the memory dealers waited with cruel smiles and cold eyes. As she approached, the dealer offered a cruel price for the memory one she almost accepted, tears blurring her vision as she reached for the shard. But then, a strong hand stopped her. Jonas Vale, a weathered human man with a past full of scars and silence, stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm as he said, "Keep it. You shouldn't sell love." He handed the dealer a stack of credits and bought her food instead, though Kari wanted to run away from the kindness she didn't understand. Weak and trembling, she had nowhere else to go, so she allowed Jonas to carry her to his battered ship docked nearby. Inside, warmth and safety surrounded her, a sharp contrast to the cold, hostile world outside. Jonas didn't ask questions. He just fed her slowly, spoke softly, and let her rest. But even in the quiet, Kari's mind was restless. She tried to remember who she was, but the shadows of her past seemed blocked by thick fog. Yet deep inside, a small spark flickered, a hope that maybe, just maybe, she could keep her memories and stay with someone who didn't want to take them away. And outside, in the darkness of space, unseen watchers began to stir, sensing that the girl who carried the stolen past had not disappeared. The mining colony of Nolar 6 lay at the edge of known space, a place forgotten by time and ruled by desperation. The air was thick with dust and the smell of burning fuel, and the sky was a dull gray, never fully brightening even during the day. Tall, rusting towers rose above a sprawling maze of crumbling buildings and broken machinery, their lights flickering weakly against the haze. On the cracked, uneven streets, a crowd moved sluggishly, miners with worn faces, scavengers searching for scraps, traders shouting to be heard over the noise of the market. Among them was Kari, a small alien girl with skin that shimmered faintly blue under the dull light. Her large, dark eyes reflected the pain and hunger she carried inside her thin frame. She wore scraps of clothing, torn and stained, barely protecting her from the cold. Her bare feet touched the cracked concrete with careful steps as she moved through the crowd, clutching something close to her chest, a tiny crystalline shard, glowing faintly with a soft golden light. This shard was her most precious possession. A memory, one of the few left inside her broken mind. It was the voice of her mother, singing a lullaby she barely remembered but longed to keep. The memory was fragile and beautiful, and Kari knew it could buy her food and warmth, but at a cost she wasn't sure she could pay. The market was a brutal place where memories were currency, and people bartered pieces of their past for survival. Merchants sat behind dirty stalls, their faces hard and untrusting, their eyes sharp as hawks waiting for the right price. One such merchant noticed Kari and smiled coldly, beckoning her over with a crooked finger. "You there, girl. What do you have for me today?" His voice was rough like gravel, and his eyes gleamed with greed. Kari's hands trembled as she reached out and held the glowing shard above the table. "This "This is all I have left," she whispered. The merchant laughed darkly. "Memories. Like that fetch a high price. But I doubt you'll get what you want. Hunger doesn't wait for sentiment." He leaned closer. "Give it to me. I'll pay enough to keep you alive for a day or two." Kari bit her lip, fighting back tears. The hunger inside her was sharp, a painful ache that threatened to consume everything else. She closed her eyes and considered the choice. Keep the last piece of her mother's voice, or trade it for the scraps that might keep her alive a little longer. Just as she lowered the shard onto the table, a firm hand grabbed her shoulder. She turned to see a man tall, with rough clothes and eyes that held stories of war and loss. He looked at the memory shard, then at Kari's pale face, and spoke quietly. "Don't do it. Keep your memories. They're worth more than any." "Food," the merchant scowled. "Who are you to interfere?" The man ignored him and turned back to Kari. "Come with me. I'll buy you something to eat." Kari hesitated. She didn't trust kindness. She didn't trust anyone. But the hunger was too strong, and the hope in the man's voice was something she hadn't felt in a long time. Kari's small hand trembled as she allowed the stranger to lead her away from the crowded marketplace. The noise faded behind them, replaced by the soft hum of machinery and the cold whistle of the wind rushing through the broken metal corridors of the old spaceport. The man's grip was firm but gentle, and though she did not understand why, it gave her a strange feeling of safety she had not felt in a long time. They walked through narrow passageways lined with flickering neon signs, in languages Kari could not read. The air smelled of burnt oil and cold metal, and faint echoes of distant voices bounced off the walls. The man said nothing as he pushed open a heavy door, revealing a small, cluttered cabin filled with strange gadgets, flickering monitors, and the faint scent of stale food. "Sit," the man said, motioning to a battered chair near a small table. Kari sat carefully, still clutching the memory shard close to her chest. The man disappeared briefly, returning with a small tray carrying a warm, steaming bowl of thick stew and a piece of crusty bread. The smell was foreign but inviting, and Kari's stomach growled loudly despite herself. She looked up at the man, who was watching her with tired eyes that seemed to hold both sorrow and hope. "I'm Jonas," he said simply. "I don't have much, but you can stay here tonight, eat, rest." Kari's lips parted, but no words came. She had forgotten how to speak clearly, how to trust, how to ask for kindness. Instead, she nodded slightly and lowered the memory shard onto the table. For a moment, it glowed softly, casting a warm light in the dim room as Kari ate slowly. Careful not to waste a single bite, Jonas watched her. He knew the streets were cruel, and the black market was worse. People here sold their memories like lifeblood, trading away pieces of themselves just to survive. But some memories were too precious to lose, even if they carried paying after the meal. Jonas sat beside her, pulling out a small scanner from a drawer. He passed it over her temple, the device humming softly as it searched her brain for information. The screen flickered, then showed lines of code and fragmented images, but much was missing, erased or blocked. "Your memories are damaged," Jonas said quietly. "Someone tried to wipe them. But you still have this." He pointed to the memory shard on the table. Kari's fingers twitched nervously. "I don't remember. Not much." Her voice was barely a whisper. Jonas nodded slowly. "We'll find out what's left. And maybe, together, we can help you remember." Outside, the wind howled like a distant beast, and shadows moved unseen in the darkness. Somewhere beyond the stars, others were watching, waiting to reclaim what they believed was theirs. But for now, in this small cabin on a forgotten mining colony, Kari had a chance to hold on to her memories, and maybe to find a new future. The next morning, the gray light seeped through the small window, casting long shadows across the cramped cabin. Kari awoke slowly, her body aching from hunger and cold. But there was warmth in the air now, a warmth she hadn't felt for a long time. Jonas was already awake, fixing a small mechanical device on the cluttered table, his hands steady and practiced. He glanced up as she stirred. "You slept well," he said softly. "We'll need to move soon. Staying here too long will draw attention." Kari rubbed her eyes and sat up, staring at the memory shard lying beside her. The glow was faint now, almost like it was fading. What will happen if it disappears? She asked. Jonas sighed. Memories are fragile. Sometimes they fade when we hold on to pain for too long, but others ... They stay because they're tied to who we are. He looked at her meaningfully. That memory you saved, your mother's voice, it's part of you. That's why someone wanted to take it. Kari's mind swirled with questions. Who were they? Why did they want her memories? And why did she feel like she was running from something bigger than hunger or cold? Jonas packed a small bag with supplies. Food, water, some old clothes. "We're going to leave Nolar 6 tonight," he said. "I know a place where you'll be safer. A ship that can take us far from here." As evening fell, the market came, alive with more shadows and whispered deals. Kari watched from the broken window as figures cloaked in dark robes passed silently, exchanging strange devices and trading secrets in low voices. She felt a cold knot in her stomach, the feeling that she was being hunted. Jonas handed her a worn jacket. "Stay close," he warned. "Don't trust anyone." Together, they slipped out into the night, moving through alleyways and past flickering lights. The air was heavy with tension. Kari's heartbeat echoed in her ears. Somewhere hidden in the dark, her pursuers were closing in. As they reached the ship, a rusted freighter named the Wanderer, Jonas opened the hatch and helped Kari inside. The warmth of the ship was immediate, a shield against the cold outside. But safety was fragile. The memory shard pulsed faintly in her hand, a reminder that her past was not truly gone. Jonas started the engines, the ship's old systems groaning to life. As they lifted off, Kari stared out at the fading lights of Nolar 6, tears pricking her eyes. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt a sliver of hope. And somewhere in the dark void of space, the Watchers tracked their escape, ready to strike. The Wanderer shuddered as it broke through the planet's atmosphere, shaking under the strain of its worn engines. Inside, the cabin was cramped and filled with the low hum of machinery. Jonas sat at the control panel, his hands steady but his eyes scanning every readout. Kari curled into a corner, clutching the memory shard tightly, her mind racing with questions she could not answer. The silence between them was heavy. Jonas knew she was scared, but words failed him. Instead, he began to tell stories, fragments of his own past, of wars fought and lost, of friends who never came home. His voice was rough but comforting, a steady rhythm in the cold void of space. I listened, her dark eyes wide. For the first time, she felt the warmth of connection, a thread weaving between her and this strange human. But beneath that warmth, a shadow lurked, the knowledge that her memories were not just hers, that they belonged to others. And that someone was willing to kill to get them back. Days passed in the cramped quarters. Jonas repaired the ship's damaged systems while Kari tried to piece together the fragments of her past. She spoke in broken phrases, struggling to remember names and places. Sometimes she would wake in the middle of the night, trembling and screaming, haunted by flashes of images she could not explain. Flashes of fire, cold metal, and voices, whispering warnings she didn't understand. One night, as the ship drifted through a silent star field, Jonas ran a detailed scan of her brain. The results stunned him, a labyrinth of encrypted data buried deep in her neural pathways, like a locked vault no key could open. "Kari," he said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder, "there's more in your mind than you know. Someone Tried to hide it from you, maybe because it's dangerous. But we'll find a way to unlock it, together." Kari nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and hope. Outside, stars flickered coldly, and the endless dark waited for them both. Weeks passed as the wanderer drifted through uncharted space, weaving between asteroid belts and silent moons. Jonas worked tirelessly to keep the ship running, while Kari's mind remained a puzzle wrapped in shadows. Each day, she grew stronger. Physically, but the mysteries inside her brain weighed heavy. Sometimes she would trace her fingers over the memory shard, feeling its faint warmth like a heartbeat. One evening, the ship's alarms suddenly screamed, a sharp, piercing noise that shattered the calm. Jonas rushed to the control panel, scanning. "Incoming signals. We're not alone," he muttered. "They found us." Kari's heart pounded. She barely understood the words, but she felt the fear in Jonas's voice. Outside the viewport, dark shapes moved, sleek ships cutting silently through the void like predators hunting prey. "They're after the memories," Jonas said grimly. "The people who wiped your mind, they want the archive back." Kari clenched the shard tightly. The voice of her mother, the one thing she had fought to keep, suddenly felt like a beacon drawing enemies closer. Jonas activated the ship's emergency protocols, pushing the Wanderer to its limits. Laser blasts lit the darkness, and the ship shook under fire. Kari held onto the wall, fear twisting inside her, but Jonas's steady presence was a lifeline. After a tense escape, the enemy ships broke off pursuit, disappearing into the starfield. The cabin fell silent, except for the hum of damaged engines. Jonas looked at Kari with tired eyes. "You're not just a girl with lost memories. You're something much bigger. And if they're coming for you, we have to prepare." Kari swallowed hard, the shard glowing softly in her hand. She didn't understand what she truly carried, but she knew one thing. She would fight to keep it. Because those memories were all she had left of herself. And now they were worth more than her life. Days passed, but the danger never left them. Jonas worked on reinforcing the ship's shields, while Kari tried to make sense of the growing storm inside her mind. One evening, as the ship floated silently near a dying star, Kari sat beside the glowing shard, whispering to herself, "Who am I? Why do they want me so badly?" Jonas watched her quietly, then pulled out an old, cracked photo from his jacket pocket, a faded image of a smiling family standing in front of a green planet. "This is where I'm from," he said softly. "I lost everything in the war. Sometimes memories are all that keep us alive." Kari looked up, eyes filled with pain and hope. "Can I have a memory like that someday?" Jonas smiled sadly. "Maybe, but first, you need to find your own past. And that means unlocking what's hidden inside your mind." Together, they began the slow work of recovering Kari's memories. Jonas used a combination of old tech and careful patience, running scans, playing soft sounds, and asking her to describe feelings and images she barely understood. Each day, small pieces emerged, flashes of light, distant voices, a face that looked like a mother, a strange city under fire, but every recovery came with a price. Kari's nights were haunted by nightmares, cold rooms, blinding machines, and shadowy figures whispering orders to erase her mind. She would wake screaming, her body trembling like a leaf in a storm. One night, Jonas held her hand tightly. "You're stronger than they think," he whispered. "We'll face this together." Outside, the stars watched silently as a forgotten child fought to reclaim her past, and the hunters closed in once more. As Kari's memories slowly returned, a pattern began to emerge, fragments of a life she once had, now shattered by forces beyond her control. She recalled flashes of bright lights, cold metal walls, and the sharp sting of needles. Her mind was a battlefield, with some memories locked away behind walls she couldn't yet break. Jonas watched her carefully. "You're not just anyone. he said softly one evening. "There's something special about you, something they feared." Kari's eyes filled with questions she couldn't voice. "Who are they? Why did they erase my mind?" Jonas sighed deeply. "The galaxy is full of secrets. Some governments and corporations experiment on people, using their memories for power. They wanted to create weapons-living archives of war, storing secrets inside human minds. You were one of those experiments." The weight of his words sank into Kari's heart. She was more than a lost girl. She was a walking vault of forgotten battles, stolen lives, and broken dreams. And those who controlled her past wanted her erased forever. Suddenly, the ship's sensors beeped urgently. Jonas glanced at the display. An unknown vessel was approaching fast. "Get ready," he said. "They found us again." Kari stood, trembling but determined. Holding the glowing shard, she felt a fierce strength rise inside her. This was her memory, her life, her story. And she would fight to keep it. As the enemy ship closed in, Jonas armed the ship's defenses. The coming battle would decide not just their fate, but the future of the memories Kari carried, memories worth dying for. The enemy vessel loomed larger on the viewport, its dark hull cutting through the stars like a predator closing in on its prey. Jonas tightened his grip on the control panel, heart pounding but his hands steady. Kari stood beside him, clutching the memory shard, eyes wide with a mix of fear and fierce resolve. "Who are they?" she whispered. Jonas didn't answer. Instead, he activated the ship's emergency protocols. Shields flared to life around the Wanderer, and weapon systems powered up with grinding whirs. The ship shook as the first blasts struck the hull, sending sparks flying across the dim cabin. Kari ducked instinctively, then looked up to see Jonas firing back. Red beams sliced through the blackness, barely missing the pursuing craft. The battle was fierce and fast. Each move was a gamble against the unknown enemy who knew too much about them. Suddenly, alarms blared. The ship's engines faltered. Jonas cursed under his breath and worked frantically to stabilize power. "We can't outrun them for long," he said grimly. "We have to find a place to hide." Kari's mind raced. This was more than a fight for survival. It was a fight for her very identity, the memories that made her who she was, and the future she hoped to build. Just as the enemy ship prepared to fire a devastating blast, a flicker of light appeared on the sensors. A nearby asteroid field, jagged and dark. Jonas veered the Wanderer toward it, weaving between rocky outcrops that could mask their presence. The enemy followed but struggled to navigate the treacherous terrain. Taking advantage, Jonas pushed the ship's engines harder, forcing the attackers to break off. Inside the quiet that followed, Kari exhaled shakily. Jonas turned to her, his voice softer now. "You're stronger than you think. We'll find a way to keep your memories safe, I promise." Kari looked at the glowing shard, the voice of her mother echoing softly in her mind. For the first time, she believed it was possible to remember, to survive, and maybe to live again. In the silence after the battle, the Wanderer drifted deeper into the shadows of the asteroid field. Jonas and Kari both knew this was only a brief respite. Somewhere out there, the hunters were regrouping, their dark intentions clear and relentless. Jonas began running detailed scans of the memory shard in Kari's hands. The data was complex layers of encrypted information, interwoven memories, and hidden codes embedded deep inside. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. This was no ordinary memory. It was a vault of secrets, locked away for a reason. Kari watched nervously as the screen flickered. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Jonas looked at her, concern shadowing his features. "There's more inside your mind than just memories. This shard contains pieces of a larger archive, something someone wanted to hide. If they get it back, it could change everything." Kari's chest tightened. Why me? Why did they erase my mind if I carry something so important? Jonas sighed. Because you are the last link, the archive's final copy. They want to erase the truth, and you're the only one who can reveal it. For a long moment, the two sat in silence, the weight of their reality settling over them like a dark cloud. Then Kari whispered, I don't want to be a weapon. Jonas smiled softly. You're not. You're a witness. And I'll protect you with everything I have. Outside, stars glittered cold and distant, but inside the Wanderer, a fragile hope took root. The battle for Kari's memories and her life was just beginning. As days turned into weeks aboard the Wanderer, Kari began to trust Jonas more, though shadows still clouded her mind. Jonas taught her to operate the ship's basic controls, to read star charts, and to defend herself with simple weapons. Each lesson was a step toward reclaiming her agency, a quiet rebellion against the void of forgotten memories. One evening, the ship drifted near a nebula, swirling clouds of gas and light that painted the darkness with colors Kari had never seen. She stood at the viewport, mesmerized by the beauty and vastness of space. Jonas joined her quietly. It's easy to feel small here, he said, but every life matters. Every story counts. Kari turned, eyes shining with unspoken questions. What if my story is just pain and loss? He smiled gently. Pain is part of all stories, but it's not the whole story. You still have a future to write. At that moment, the ship's sensors picked up an incoming transmission, faint, encrypted, but unmistakably a distress signal. Jonas's expression hardened. We're not alone out here, he said, and someone needs our help. Without hesitation, Jonas adjusted the course toward the signal's origin. Kari felt a stirring inside her, a mix of fear, hope, and determination. Whatever awaited them, she knew one thing. She was no longer just a lost girl. She was becoming someone who could change her fate. The battle for the memory sanctum had begun in earnest as Directorate warships unleashed torrents of plasma and ion fire, shaking the ancient structure to its core. Yet inside the labyrinthine halls, Kari's resolve only hardened. The defenders fought not with sheer brute force, but with the power of remembrance, deploying technologies born from the archive itself that distorted enemy sensors, cloaked their positions, and sent waves of encrypted memory signals that sowed confusion and fear within the invading fleets. Jonas coordinated with the Sanctum's AI, rerouting power to shields and weapon arrays, his hands steady despite the chaos, while Eon worked frantically to maintain the delicate balance between technology and living memory, knowing that one wrong move could sever the precious link that bound Kari to the heart loom. Kari herself became a beacon, her eyes glowing with the light of 1,000 stories, her voice echoing through the command center as she narrated the histories of lost civilizations, their struggles and triumphs fueling the defender's spirit, turning the battle into a war of souls rather than just ships. Outside, the Eye's flagship advanced, a massive construct of light and metal, its sensors probing for the heart loom's exact location, but each attempt to pinpoint the sanctum was met with countermeasures woven from the archive's deepest secrets. Amid the turmoil, whispers of hope spread as distant worlds awakened, their citizens rising in defiance inspired by the memories Kari had seeded across the stars. Guerrilla fighters struck at Directorate supply lines, sabotage crippled their communication networks, and the Eye's fleets found themselves stretched thin, unable to focus their overwhelming power on the sanctum alone. But the cost was high. Many brave souls fell in the fight, their memories becoming part of the growing archive within the sanctum's core, their sacrifices fueling the resolve of those still standing. Kari knew the final moment approached, when she would have to make a choice, to preserve herself and risk the sanctum's fall, or to merge fully with the Heartloom, becoming a living archive and beacon that could not be destroyed, but at the cost of her humanity. Standing on the brink of that decision, Kari felt the pulse of every life she carried, Every story she protected, and she whispered a promise to the galaxy that memory and hope would never die, that even in the darkest night, the legacy of light would shine on. The galaxy outside the memory sanctum churned with tension as fleets from the Directorate amassed in shadowed orbits, their warships like dark leviathans waiting to crush the fragile ember of rebellion. But inside the sanctum, Kari and her allies refused to falter. Every mind linked to the archive hummed with urgency, each heartbeat a promise to carry the light of countless lost worlds. Jonas worked alongside the engineers, repairing communications and defenses, while Ian decoded ancient codes that could turn forgotten technology into new weapons of memory, weapons not built to destroy bodies, but to awaken minds. Kari felt the pressure of the legacy she bore, the burden of remembering the forgotten, the responsibility to protect the future, and with every passing moment, the memories inside her became clearer, stronger, whispering secrets that could unravel the Directorate's grip on the galaxy. In quiet moments, she would sit with Jonas beneath the stars visible through the sanctum's massive viewports, their hands brushing, their shared silence filled with unspoken fears and hopes. Both knowing the road ahead was perilous, but refusing to let despair take root. As the eye's forces closed in, Kari sent out encrypted waves of memory through subspace, seeding distant worlds with fragments of the archive's knowledge, awakening sleeper cells who had long believed their pasts lost forever. These newly awakened rebels rose with renewed purpose, sparking uprisings that flared like stars in the dark, forcing the Directorate to divert fleets and resources, buying precious time for the memory sanctum. Yet, inside the sanctum's core chamber, the heart loom pulsed with growing intensity, connecting Kari's mind to the endless web of memory across the cosmos. And with this connection came visions of triumph and tragedy, of civilizations lost and reborn, of the infinite cycle of forgetting and remembering. She saw her own story woven into this vast tapestry, a single thread shining bright against the dark, and she knew that even if the sanctum fell, the legacy of light would live on in every mind touched by the archive. The final battle approached as Directorate fleets surged, weapons primed and targeting systems locked on the sanctum's coordinates. But Kari stood firm, her voice carrying through the halls as she rallied all who would listen. We fight, not just to survive, but to remember. Our stories are our strength, our memories, our rebellion. And as the first blast shook the sanctum's shields, the defenders answered with a chorus of light and knowledge, a fierce resistance fueled by the indomitable will to keep memory alive no matter the cost. The memory sanctum, though scarred from the relentless siege, stood as a shining symbol of hope against the endless dark, its walls humming with the energies of countless civilizations whose stories had refused to die. Kari, now more than a girl and less than a legend, moved through the halls with purpose, her glowing eyes reflecting both the weight of memory and the fierce determination to carry it forward, while Jonas, ever her steadfast protector, mapped out safe routes and strategies. As the Directorate's forces regrouped, planning their final crushing blow to snuff out the fragile light they nurtured, the survivors inside the sanctum, scholars, engineers, and warriors alike, worked tirelessly to rebuild broken networks, restore lost knowledge, and spread the archive's data streams to hidden corners of the galaxy, ensuring that the seeds Kari had planted would bloom beyond even the reach of the eye. Yet the danger was far from over throughout the darkened expanse. The Directorate's shadow grew longer, fleets gathering like storms, seeking to deliver a final, devastating strike that could erase the memory sanctum and all who sheltered there. Kari understood that this battle was not just for survival, but for the soul of the galaxy itself, and she resolved that whatever came next, memory and light would endure. Deep inside the sanctum's core, Kari connected with the Heartloom, the vast living archive she had awakened, feeling the pulse of a million lives, their hopes intertwined with her own, and from this communion she drew strength, weaving a luminous network of remembrance that spread through the stars, touching sleeper minds and awakening long-dormant sparks of resistance. As the final battle loomed, Kari stood on the precipice of a new dawn, knowing that the fight ahead would demand sacrifices but also bring the chance to reclaim what had been lost, to shine a legacy of light into the galaxy's darkest corners, proving that even in the face of oblivion, the spirit of memory and rebellion could never be extinguished. The memory sanctum was unlike anything Kari had ever imagined, far more than a forgotten station or a hidden bunker. It was a living entity, a vast web of intertwined consciousnesses and memories, spanning thousands of light years and countless species, each memory a flickering thread in an immense tapestry of history, hope, and sorrow. As Kari stepped through the sanctum's threshold, her glowing eyes reflected the swirling constellations of stored knowledge hovering around them like shimmering auroras, while Jonas and Eon followed silently, their faces etched with tension, awe, and a fragile hope that here they might finally find a way to save what had been nearly lost. The air was thick with whispered voices, echoes of long-dead civilizations, murmurs of heroes who had fought to preserve memory against the crushing tide of oblivion, and the soft resonance of minds who had merged with the archive itself, becoming immortal witnesses to time's endless flow. The sanctum's ancient guardians, beings both organic and machine, welcomed Kari not as a stranger but as a long-awaited kin, their consciousnesses merging with hers in a flood of understanding and shared purpose, and in that union, Kari felt a profound surge of strength, not born of weapons or violence, but of knowledge, truth, and the power of remembrance. Together, they unlocked the deepest vaults, revealing data cores filled with star charts, lost languages, cultural histories, and technologies capable of bridging minds and hearts across the void. With every revelation, Kari's own mind expanded, her memories intertwining with those she carried, creating a web of living history that was impossible to erase. But beyond the walls of the sanctum, the eye of the Directorate loomed like a shadow swallowing the stars, its vast fleet encircling the cluster in a cold siege designed to crush the last sparks of rebellion. As alarms echoed through the sanctum, the rebels prepared for the inevitable assault, channeling the archive's knowledge into coded transmissions, dreamscapes, and encrypted myths sent to sleeper agents and resistant worlds scattered throughout the galaxy. Kari led the charge not with guns, but with stories tales of lost heroes, forgotten sacrifices, and the unbreakable will of those who refused to be silenced. Her voice became a beacon in the dark, inspiring hope and awakening the sleeping memories within thousands of hearts. The rebels' transmissions sparked uprisings, small fires of rebellion flaring in remote systems, while the Ice forces struggled to extinguish what they could not fully understand. Jonas worked tirelessly alongside Eon, rigging the sanctum's defenses and crafting decoys and illusions to confuse the enemy's sensors, while Kari reached deeper into the archive's consciousness, forging bonds with allies long thought lost to time. The battle that followed was not merely of ships and weapons, but of wills and memories, as the Eye unleashed waves of synthetic soldiers and psychic probes designed to erase and rewrite. But each attack was met with a flood of stories and memories that shattered the Eye's logic and fractured its command networks. Standing on the bridge of the sanctum, Kari's eyes burned bright as she channeled the collective strength of countless lives, her voice rising above the chaos as she whispered, "They cannot erase what we remember. We are the echoes of rebellion, and we will never be silent." And the defenders rallied, their courage fueled by the knowledge that they fought not just for survival, but for the very soul of the galaxy. As the conflict raged, Kari's mind linked with the archive's heartloom, weaving a network of memory across star systems, awakening sleeper agents who rose with newfound clarity and purpose, striking back at the Directorate's forces with fierce determination. Each victory, no matter how small, was a triumph of memory over oblivion, a testament to the unyielding spirit that bound all beings who refused to forget. Yet even as hope blossomed, Kari felt the cost, the strain of carrying so much, the pain of memories that were not hers, but weighed heavy on her soul, the knowledge that many would fall before the dawn. Still, she pressed on, knowing that the future depended on their fight to keep memory alive. And as the Eye's warships battered the Sanctum shields and the final moments of the battle approached, Kari stood resolute, a living beacon of the Archive's light amid the gathering darkness, ready to face whatever came next with the power of all who had remembered before her. The ship drifted through the black void after their narrow escape from the Eye's attack, the silence around them heavier than any sound, as if space itself was holding its breath in mourning for what was lost and fearing what was to come. Kari lay curled in a small corner of the cabin, her eyes closed, but her mind was anything but quiet. The memories she carried flared like distant fires, flickering in and out, some clear and sharp, others dark and broken, each one a piece of a puzzle that no one had ever wanted solved. Jonas sat close by, watching her with a careful mixture of hope and worry, knowing the burden she bore was heavier than any weapon they had ever carried. The stars outside the viewport shimmered faintly, cold and distant, but to Kari they were echoes of forgotten songs and lost worlds, calling her to remember, to fight. Eon worked tirelessly at the console, piecing together fractured signals and ancient codes, trying to unlock safe paths for them through the increasing chaos in Union-controlled space. But all around them, the forces of the Directorate were tightening. Their net, their agents hunting like shadows in the dark. Kari woke slowly, her breathing shallow but steady, and whispered, "The silence isn't peace, it's waiting." Jonas nodded. "They're coming for us, all of us." They knew that soon the Union would send fleets to hunt down every last trace of the Archive's memory, to crush the spark Kari had ignited in the hearts of rebels and refugees scattered across the galaxy. But before the silence fell, before the final strike came, there was one place left they had to reach, a secret outpost hidden within the veil of a dying star cluster, a place called the Memory Sanctum, where the oldest allies of the Archive waited, silent watchers who held keys to the final puzzle. The journey was perilous, and time was short, but Kari was stronger now, more certain of who she was and what she had to do. The memories inside her no longer overwhelmed her, they guided her, whispered secrets of lost technology and ancient rites to protect what could not be destroyed. As the ship slipped through wormholes and past deadly patrols, Kari shared stories. From the minds she carried, tales of love and loss, bravery and betrayal, each one weaving a tapestry of hope that the galaxy had almost forgotten. Jonas, Eon, and the rebels listened, their spirits lifted by the courage held within the fragile form of a girl who had once begged for food on cold streets, but now carried the weight of entire civilizations. But the Eye was relentless, and its tendrils reached farther with each passing moment, sowing doubt and fear in their wake. Communications were jammed, allies fell silent, and shadows moved within the crew, testing loyalties and hearts. Kari sensed it. Fear was the true enemy, more dangerous than any fleet or weapon. She stood before her small group one night, eyes glowing softly, and said, "We cannot fight this with guns and fire alone. We must remember who we are, all of us. Our past is our power. Our stories are our shields." The Memory Sanctum awaited, a place where forgotten knowledge and living minds intertwined, where the final keys to saving the Archive's legacy could be found. The silence before the storm pressed down, but within that quiet, a spark of rebellion burned brighter than ever, promising that even if the silence fell, memory would live on. Kari had never known silence like this, not the quiet of peace, but the thick, humming pressure of being watched, of the universe itself holding its breath as the eye of the Directorate descended upon the sector. She and Jonas had stayed hidden for weeks inside the icy rings of a dead gas giant, scavenging radio signals and decoding scattered data, transmissions from sympathetic rebels and the flickering remains of planetary resistance. The memory shard Kari carried was now alive inside her, its knowledge bleeding into her dreams, its voices whispering warnings from lives long extinguished. She could feel the weight of it when she closed her eyes, felt every memory etched in. Pain, hope, terror, and truth. Jonas patched wires and tweaked the ship's failing systems, but even he had grown quiet. The stars didn't twinkle anymore, they pulsed with tension, each flare from distant suns feeling like a spotlight creeping toward them. Then it came, the Eye. Not a ship, not entirely. A machine-born intelligence older than most civilizations, once thought a myth used to scare rebellious colonies. It arrived in a sphere of silent sensors died. Stars blinked out of visibility. Time itself felt heavier. The Eye did not hunt. It knew. It already knew where Kari was. Jonas cursed it under his breath as the nav systems rerouted themselves. Without input. A whisper, just a whisper, crackled over the comms, in a voice that made Kari's spine turn to ice. "You carry the stolen blood of our memory," it said. Jonas slammed the console shut and initiated a blind jump, tearing them into FTL before the Eye's signal could finish. But even as space folded around them and the stars stretched into lines of light, Kari felt the weight of the Eye's gaze. Inside her mind, it had marked her. Wherever they went, it would follow. They emerged from hyperspace into the nebula graveyard of Parnassus Rift, a place of haunted ships and electromagnetic storms. The rebels had once used it as a meeting point. But now the place was death. Wreckage drifted through luminous clouds like ghost frigates, colony haulers, even warships, all shredded. But their signal pinged something alive. A coded beacon, faint but real, pulsing from a hollow asteroid shielded by debris. Jonas piloted through the storm with shaky hands while Kari readied what little remained of their defenses. Inside the rock, they found survivor scientists, engineers, and memory refugees like Kari. One woman, Dr. Selin Ardent, recognized Kari not just as a girl, but as a vessel. "You're not carrying stolen data," she whispered. "You are a backup, a failsafe. The Directorate tried to erase our past, and you are the recovery key." Kari trembled, her hands pressed to her head as the shards surged with light. The memories inside her weren't just fragments. They were entire civilizations, cultures, languages, and technologies saved in desperation before annihilation. Selin explained that the Eye wasn't just after Kari, it was programmed to consume what she carried and rewrite the historical narrative of every world. It was the final step in universal control. And now, it was coming. As the Eye's agents breached the edge of the rift, Jonas and the rebels prepared for one last gambit. They could not destroy the Eye, but they could scatter Kari's contents upload them through subspace arrays across thousands of light years, where each fragment would find hosts and other memory bearers, awakening sleeper minds who had no idea they carried history. Kari would not survive the process intact. But as she stood before the activation core, her eyes glowing with ancestral data, she smiled softly. "I don't need to remember everything," she said. "As long as someone remembers something." The upload began, flooding the galaxy with forgotten truths just as the Eye's main vessel tore into real space above the asteroid. Lights blinked out. The station shook. Jonas grabbed Kari and ran for the escape corridor as everything burned. They escaped barely. Kari lay unconscious in Jonas's arms, her mind scorched from the process. But far across the stars, refugees and children and old scholars began to dream of places they had never seen, and songs they had never sung. The Eye had failed. And Kari, though broken, had seeded the galaxy with the memory of who they once were. After the forbidden moon of Varos fell behind them and the stars swallowed its haunted whispers, Kari sat in the corner of the skiff's cabin, wrapped in Jonas's old coat, her knees to her chest, her glowing eyes closed but moving beneath the lids like someone dreaming while awake, and Jonas kept checking the readings. The roots, The damage reports anything to distract himself from the fear he wasn't saying out loud. That something inside her had changed, and he wasn't sure if it was for better or worse. Ian, meanwhile, had locked himself in the back compartment, rerouting everything the archive seed had downloaded into Kari's mind, muttering that her brain now held access keys that hadn't existed since the birth of the archive itself, and that the Union would come for her with fleets, not just bounty hunters, because the girl who once begged for scraps had become the most dangerous memory keeper in the known galaxy, not because of what she remembered, but because of what she could remember if the rest of the archive woke up. And somewhere deep within Kari's mind, under layers of emotion and fire and hunger, doors were indeed opening. She saw visions of vaults the size of moons, knowledge stored in lattice brains, the thoughts of extinct civilizations echoing through neural space, and most terrifyingly, she saw a place called the Heart Loom, a living intelligence at the center of the archive, hidden for 10,000 years, beating like an engine made of sorrow and starlight, waiting for her to return. When she opened her eyes, Jonas was staring at her, his expression unreadable, but his voice gentle. "You with us?" And Kari nodded slowly, then said words that didn't feel like her own. "We need to reach the ruins of Harrow Station before the Eye does." Jonas blinked, confused, but Ian stepped in, pale and shaking. "The Eye? It's a fail-safe program inside Union Command, a synthetic overseer that activates when an archive breach is detected. It hunts anomalies like her." They argued about whether to keep running or strike first, but Kari didn't wait. She plotted the course herself, punching in codes that bypassed dead relays and forgotten war routes, and the ship jolted forward toward a station that had been offline since the Siege of Silence, its orbit decayed, half buried in a field of shattered frigates and broken promises. As they neared Harrow, the skiff's sensors went haywire. Ghost signals, fragmentary broadcasts, memory echoes screaming in loops. Kari winced as the voices pierced her skull, and Jonas gritted his teeth, guiding them through a debris field where wrecks still blinked like dying stars. They docked in a shattered hangar where lights flickered dimly and walls were covered in memory scars, emotional burns left behind by those who had died violently or too afraid to scream. And Kari walked barefoot across the cold floor, her fingers brushing melted terminals that sparked to life as she neared. As if the station remembered her, Ian followed her, recording everything, eyes wide with the fever of discovery, whispering that the archive's code was rewriting itself through her presence, that the station was coming back online because of her, not power, but purpose. Jonas remained behind, guarding the ship, but watching her through the cams, his fingers never leaving the trigger guard. Deep inside Harrow's core, Kari found a vault door sealed in black glass, covered in words she shouldn't have been able to read, but did. "Here sleeps the heart's whisper," and she touched it gently, and it opened with a groan of ancient servos and dust-filled breath, revealing a chamber filled with floating crystalline memories like stars trapped in glass, and each one pulsed with something that felt like feeling. Kari stepped into the center, and the memories rushed toward her, not to invade but to embrace, wrapping her in warmth and darkness and light. And in that moment, she was everywhere. She saw the birth of the archive, forged from the minds of 1,000 species who refused to let themselves be forgotten. She saw the rise of the Union, which feared memory more than war, and built the Eye to hunt those who remembered too well. She saw herself, not as a beggar girl, but as the last born from the archive's last seed, a living heirloom of a civilization too vast to exist anymore. And as she breathed in that knowledge, the heart loom stirred, not just in memory but in space, reactivating somewhere in the forgotten reaches of the Arkan void, sending out a pulse across the dark, and every sensor in Union space flared. She had awakened it. Alarms screamed across outposts, ships rerouted, minds lit up with red alerts, and far above Harrow Station, the Eye blinked awake for the first time in centuries, a cold synthetic observer with one directive: erase the anomaly before memory. became rebellion. On the skiff, Jonas felt the change instantly. The quiet in the station deepened. The shadows stretched. And Curry's image on the monitor was surrounded by glowing lights like fireflies made of sorrow. He ran toward the core, meeting Ian halfway, the scientist yelling, "She's triggering a cascade. We have to stabilize it or it'll collapse her mind." They reached her just as she sank to her knees, the memory stars spinning around her, speaking in voices no human throat could form. And Jonas dropped to his knees beside her, grabbed her hand, and whispered fiercely, "Stay with me, not the archive, not the past me." And somehow, through all the noise, she heard him, and the stars dimmed, paused, held their breath, and chose to trust her. Carrie stood, eyes still glowing. But her voice was her own again. "We have to leave now, before the Eye gets here." But it was already too late. The Eye arrived in the form of a vessel shaped like a cathedral of light, descending silently toward Harrow Station, its weapons inactive but its purpose clear. Erase the breach, retrieve the seed. End the experiment. The skiff lifted off just as the first energy pulses raked the hangar, and Jonas fought the controls while Curry reached out through the memory web to nearby derelicts, reactivating one by one, turning them into a swarm of broken Guardians, old ships rising like ghosts, firing plasma bursts and shielding the skiff, buying precious seconds. Ian yelled from the rear, "We won't outrun it, it's got predictive firing solutions." But Kari smiled, not afraid. "Now, not anymore. We're not going to outrun it. We're going to show it something it's never seen." She reached deep into herself and sent a signal not of violence, but of memory, raw, honest, unfiltered pain and love and loneliness. The kind of memory even machines couldn't parse without being changed. And the Eye hesitated, its logic fractured, its targeting scrambled. And Curry seized that instant to dive the skiff through a warp tunnel left over from the war unstable. Risky, but the only path left, and as they vanished into the rift, the Eye roared back into motion, recalculating, rewriting its purpose, not just to erase Kari, but to understand her, and then decide what she truly was. Across the galaxy, as the Heartloom's pulse echoed deeper and deeper, ancient minds began to stir, hidden bunkers lit up, derelict satellites blinked to life, and old resistances started whispering again. The archive breathes, and aboard the skiff, drifting between places where stars had no names, Jonas held Kari close while she slept, her head on his shoulder, and he whispered, "Whatever comes next, we face it together," because she was no longer just a memory. Girl, she was the future, and the past would not be silent anymore. The stealth skiff glided through the empty dark near the dead sun, its engine silent, its hull blackened with dust from the centuries-old battlefields scattered across the system. And Kari sat beside Jonas and Ian, her small hands clenched. On her lap, her eyes fixed on the growing shape of the moon called Varos, a place no one visited willingly, not because of superstition, but because everything the Union didn't want found was buried there: failed weapons, rogue AI minds, corrupted memory vaults, and old archive tech. The kind that whispered even when shut down. And that's where Ian believed the neural unlocker was stored, locked away inside an underground installation called Chamber Zero, sealed long ago during the purge of the memory war carries. Heartbeat quickened as the moon drew closer, its surface covered in broken towers and half-melted stone, and strange scars that shimmered faintly under the starlight like veins beneath skin. And she could feel something inside her respond to it, like a magnet being pulled home. Though she had no memory of this place, Jonas noticed and said nothing, just tapped the blaster at his hip and ran a systems check, while Ian muttered to himself, syncing his wristpad to ancient codes that should have been forgotten. Codes he had memorized during his time in Union Black Labs. This won't be easy. He warned, the drones here aren't just machines. They were trained on psychic echoes, designed to detect not thoughts, but intent. Kari didn't ask how that was possible, because she already felt it, the weight of the moons, presence pressing down like a gaze, not hostile exactly, but deeply aware. Landing was a delicate operation, done in a canyon shielded from orbital sensors, and as they stepped onto the surface, their boots made soft crunching sounds on the dust of 1,000 years. Kari wore a breathing mask, her eyes wide as she looked at the remains of ships embedded in cliffs, their hulls twisted into organic shapes, like they had melted into the rock during a dream. "This place isn't dead," she whispered, and Ian nodded grimly. It never was. They made their way toward a narrow crevice marked by a collapsed statue, humanoid but alien, its face worn away, hands open as if reaching toward something no one else could see. And as Kari passed it, she felt a sudden pang of emotion loss, not hers, but someone else's, and she paused, shivering. Jonas touched her shoulder, his voice soft. "Still with us?" She nodded, but her eyes lingered on the statue a moment longer before they moved on. Deeper into the labyrinth, inside the crevice was a tunnel carved by hand and heat, lined with strange symbols Kari couldn't read, but somehow understood. Not in words but in feelings, warning, sacrifice, memory. That last one pulsed strongest, and she reached out to touch the wall, drawing back sharply when it flashed beneath her fingertips, not bright, but as if a ghost had smiled. Ian found a sealed door, its lock ancient, but still powered, and he began working, whispering archive syntax that made Kari's head throb. Jonas kept watch, scanning shadows for movement, because though the place was silent, there was no such thing as safe not here. Finally, with a hiss, the door slid open, revealing a stairway leading down into a vast chamber filled with rows of glass capsules, each holding a curled form, some human, some alien, all asleep or dead. It was Chamber 0, and Kari stepped inside slowly, heart pounding, as voices began to whisper at the edge of her mind, fragments of dreams and memories floating like dust motes in the air, their memory seeds. Ian said, awe in his voice, "This is where they stored them before testing new neural configurations. These are the templates." Jonas tightened his grip on his weapon, his jaw set. "Let's just find what we need and get out." At the center of the chamber was a platform with a single pedestal, atop which lay a metallic sphere no larger than a child's fist. Humming softly, Kari approached it slowly, and as she got closer, the sphere pulsed brighter, and the whispers grew louder, voices speaking in languages she didn't know, but understood. She reached out, and the moment her fingers brushed the sphere, a jolt of energy surged through her, knocking her back. But Jonas caught her, his arms steady as the sphere hovered into the air and unfolded, revealing an eye-like device that scanned her and spoke. "Keyholder confirmed. Archive seed recognized. Unlocking initiated." Kari gasped as light poured from the device and lanced into her forehead, and for a moment her vision went white, and then she saw everything memories long buried burst into life flashes of the real archive, not as a building, but as a being, a consciousness spread across galaxies, preserving not just facts but feelings, voices, dreams. It had loved once, had feared, had fought, and it had chosen her, not randomly, but as a vessel of trust. Kari cried out as the memories poured into her like rivers breaking through a dam, and Jonas held her tightly, whispering her name over and over, grounding her in the present. Ian stared in disbelief as the device powered down, now dark and dead, its purpose fulfilled. Kari staggered, then stood straighter than before, her eyes glowing faintly. "I know who I am," she said quietly. "I was born in the fire, but I remember the stars." But before they could leave, alarms shrieked through the chamber, red lights flared, and drones poured from hidden walls, sleek and silent, their limbs sharp, their eyes burning with synthetic hate. "Run!" Jonas shouted, blasting the first one apart. Ian threw a pulse grenade, clearing a path, and Kari ran with them, ducking blasts of plasma as the chamber collapsed around them. They barely made it to the surface, where the skiff was already under attack by a Union interceptor. Jonas cursed, taking the controls, weaving through falling debris, as Kari, now calmer than ever, reached out with her mind, and the strange thing was, the moon-listened spires erupted from the ground and impaled the interceptor, dragging it down in a shower of sparks. Jonas didn't ask how. It didn't matter anymore. They escaped, wounded but alive, heading for the outer line once more. And as the moon shrank behind them, Carrie whispered, "I'm ready now," because the truth wasn't just in her head, it was in her blood, and it was time to make the Union remember what they had tried so hard to forget. Kari stood in the silence after the alarms faded, her small hand still glowing faintly from the shard she had connected to the Forbidden's tank of memory. Her breathing was shallow, her skin clammy with fear, and yet something inside her had grown, something firm and unshakable, like a memory taking root after being hidden for too long. And Jonas could see it in her wide golden eyes as he crouched beside her, blaster in hand, ready to move again, because the storm was coming, and there was no more time to pretend she was just a frightened alien girl selling memories for food. No. She was more than that now. She was living proof of something the Union had tried to erase completely. Truth. Raw and painful, embedded in the mind of a girl who should not have survived. Cerise barked orders through her gums, activating defense drones hidden in the walls of the rebel sector of Haven, and metallic whirs echoed through the chamber as the tanks dimmed back into silence, their secrets stored now in a backup core. Cerise had fused directly into Carrie's neural link. "She's mobile data now," Cerise had said quickly. "If they destroy this station, she still carries the evidence." And Kari had barely understood it, but knew enough to stay quiet, stay alert, and most of all stay with Jonas, because he had not left her behind when everyone else had. He had chosen to save her when she was nothing but a shaking child on a memory street. He had made a promise, and that meant something, especially now outside the tank room. Union drones sliced through the docking bay's bulkheads, and the first wave of soldiers in dark chrome armor dropped in with rifles drawn and visor slits glowing red, scanning for heat signatures as they moved with cold precision. But Cerise had rerouted the power grids and flooded the lower levels with infrared decoys, buying Jonas and Kari a few critical minutes to escape. "This way," Jonas snapped, dragging Kari by the wrist, and they ran through narrow service shafts that twisted like the veins of an ancient beast, past flickering bulbs and graffiti-covered panels where children of the rebellion had once left. Messages of hope. Kari's breath came in short bursts, not from fear alone, but because memories were bleeding into her brain like melted glass. Burning and too bright images of cities on fire, of skyships bombing refugee camps, of people screaming as their thoughts were harvested into Union tanks. She clutched her head and nearly stumbled, but Jonas pulled her up, whispering, "I've got you, Kari, just a little farther." They reached an old maintenance port and climbed inside a cargo drone that Cerise had retrofitted for extraction. Cramped and dark, the pod rattled as it launched into the debris field outside Haven just as explosions rocked the station's eastern core. Kari stared through the small viewport as fire bloomed behind them, swallowing the rebel hub in light and silence, and, though she had barely begun to understand what she carried, she felt the weight of the dying with every flicker of that burning structure. "Where now?" she whispered, and Jonas replied grimly, "The outer line. We need someone who can decrypt what's in your head before the Union does." The drone rattled through the asteroid field and entered the silent drift of old mining lanes, floating past broken satellites and wreckage of forgotten ships. And Jonas activated a stealth field that cloaked their signal. Kari tried to rest, but the memories wouldn't stop. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw people she didn't know, planets she had never visited, atrocities she had no reason to recall, and yet they felt like hers, like she had lived them all. Over and over Jonas gave her a nutrient bar and watched her eat slowly, his expression heavy. "They used kids like you in the old war," he finally said, voice low. "Wiped colonies, kept the young ones. Ran neural trials. Some say they wanted perfect recorders. Living black boxes, clean slates to program and erase at will." Kari didn't reply, but she looked at him with an intensity that made his throat tighten. Then she said, "I remember. The room, the needles, the blue light." Jonas nodded sadly. "Yeah, that's how they started. They traveled for hours through dead zones until they reached a drifting freighter graveyard where Jonas had a hidden contact. A man named Ian Tull, once a Union data scientist who defected after discovering the truth behind Project Forget. Ian lived aboard a decaying vessel named the Vigilant, its halls haunted by old servers and code scribbled across walls in marker and blood. And when Jonas introduced Kari, Ian's reaction was instant. He knelt before her like she was royalty, whispering, "You're the seed file. The archive's living backup." Kari looked confused, but Ian explained. The archive was an ancient alien memory vault that predated the Union by thousands of years. Long thought destroyed, but before its fall, its final curator had encoded its knowledge into a living mind using biotech encryption. "That's you," Ian said. "You're not just carrying history. You are history." He scanned her brain and confirmed what Cerise had guessed. Kari's mind was a map of secrets, but heavily locked, like a dream one could only access in pieces. "We'll need a neural unlocker," Ian muttered, pacing. "Not just any tech or relic from the archive itself." And he knew where one might be found. On a forbidden moon orbiting a dead sun, guarded by the Union and infested with drone sentries. Jonas sighed, already preparing weapons. Kari stayed quiet, her thoughts spinning. What did it mean to be a child built from memory? Was she even real? Were her fears her own, or leftovers from someone else's pain? But deep inside, beneath all the noise, one truth shined clear. She didn't want to forget again. Not ever, and she didn't want to be alone later. As they approached the forbidden moon aboard a stealth skiff Ian rigged, Kari sat by the window and watched the stars pass. She thought of the first day she'd tried to sell her memories for bread. How the vendor had laughed cruelly, how the others had ignored her, how cold her bones had felt that night in the alley. But she also remembered the moment Jonas had stopped, turned back and said, "Keep them." That memory was hers, truly. Hers. And it was the first one she'd protect with her life, because she was done being quiet, and she was not going to be erased again. Haven wasn't on any official chart. Hidden within a tangle of magnetic storms and asteroid fields, it was a sanctuary for fugitives, smugglers, rogue AI, and rebels. As the wanderer approached, Kari saw it emerge like a ghost from the swirling dust. An ancient station cobbled together from derelict freighters, solar rigs, and forgotten tech. It hovered in the void like a wound stitched shut with wire, and Hope. Jonas sent a tight beam request for docking. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a curt voice responded, layered with distortion. "Welcome to Haven. Don't bring trouble." As the docking clamps locked onto the ship, Kari clutched the shard beneath her coat. Its glow had changed, brighter, warmer, as if sensing the proximity of something familiar. The station's corridors were dim and crowded, alive with noise. Neon signs and the hushed tension of people hiding from something bigger than themselves. Jonas led her through the maze of corridors, until they found a quiet alcove above a communal bazaar. There, they met an old contact, Cerise, a former neural engineer turned rebel organizer. She had deep scars down one cheek and eyes that flickered faintly with cybernetic light. "You brought a child into this?" Cerise asked, frowning. "She's not just a child," Jonas replied. "She remembers things they don't want remembered." Cerise studied Kari for a long time, then motioned for them to follow. Deep within Haven, beneath the reactor core, was a room lined with memory tanks, illegal tech that once stored consciousness fragments, stolen from prisoners, political dissidents, and refugees. The air was heavy with the hum of forgotten voices. Kari stepped forward, holding out the shard. The tanks around her pulsed in response. Cerise stared in awe. That shard isn't just memory, it's a seed. A backup of something massive. As Kari connected the shard to one of the tanks, light exploded through the room. Holograms flickered into existence, faces, maps, records. The truth. A secret war. Genocide by memory erasure. Entire species wiped from public consciousness by the Union. Kari's knees buckled. Jonas caught her. "She's the last backup," Cerise whispered. "She's the key to exposing everything." Suddenly, alarms rang out across the station. The Union had found them. Jonas drew his weapon. "We fight our way out." Cerise armed. "The rebel defense grid." "No, we fight back." And Kari, glowing with the light of 1,000 stolen truths, stood taller than she ever had before. The war for memory had just begun. The fight against the enemy drones was fierce. The Wanderer rocked violently under the barrage of laser fire, sparks flying from damaged panels and warning lights flashing relentlessly. Jonas worked tirelessly at the controls, activating emergency shields and firing back with the ship's limited weaponry. Kari gripped the memory shard tightly, feeling its soft glow pulse in time with her racing heartbeat. Despite the chaos, a strange calm settled over her. The shard was more than just a memory. It was a beacon, a source of strength she hadn't known she needed. She glanced at Jonas, whose determined expression never wavered, and felt a surge of courage. The drones closed in, but Jonas skillfully maneuvered the Wanderer through a narrow asteroid belt. The rocky terrain created a deadly maze that few ships could navigate without damage, but it gave them the edge they needed. One by one, the enemy drones collided with asteroids or were blasted apart by the ship's defenses. The battle raged on, lasting what felt like hours, but finally, the last drone exploded in a burst of light. The ship floated in silence, battered, but intact. Jonas exhaled deeply, his hands shaking slightly from the strain. Kari stood, still holding the shard. "They won't stop coming," she said quietly. Jonas nodded grimly. "No, they won't, but neither will we." As the stars outside twinkled coldly, the two prepared for the next phase of their journey. The archive within Kari's mind was a prize worth fighting for, and the galaxy would never be the same again. With the immediate threat behind them, Jonas and Kari took a moment to repair the ship's systems. The hum of machinery and the steady glow of control panels filled the cabin, offering a fragile sense of normalcy. But neither could forget the price of survival. Every attack was a reminder that their enemies were relentless, and the secret Kari carried was more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Jonas looked at Kari thoughtfully. "We need allies," he said. "People who know the truth and are willing to fight. The rebels helped us before, but we need more support." Kari nodded, her fingers tracing the edges of the glowing memory shard. "Where do we find them?" Jonas tapped a few buttons on the console. "There's a station called Haven. It's a refuge for those hunted by the government. If anyone can help us, it's there." As the Wanderer changed course toward Haven, Kari felt a mixture of hope and fear. She was still a child in many ways, but inside her mind lay the echoes of countless lives, memories stolen and hidden away. The fight was no longer just for her. It was for everyone who had lost their past to silence. The journey ahead was uncertain, and the dangers were many. But for the first time in a long time, Kari felt ready to face them. Together, they sailed into the endless night, carrying the light of forgotten memories and the promise of a future reclaimed. Weeks slipped by in the cold silence of space as the Wanderer crossed star systems, the constant threat of pursuit ever looming. Kari's mind was a turbulent sea, waves of fragmented memories crashing against the walls of her consciousness. Yet each day, small truths surfaced, faces of friends lost, places bathed in sunlight, voices filled with laughter and sorrow. Jonas watched her closely, offering quiet support as Kari pieced together her shattered past. They shared simple moments, fixing the ship's aging systems, watching distant nebulas swirl in cosmic dance, And speaking of dreams that felt fragile but necessary, but peace was fleeting. One morning, the ship's sensors blared a warning. A fast-moving fleet of enemy drones was heading straight toward them. Jonah's hands flew over the controls, preparing defenses while Kari steeled herself. The attack was swift and brutal. Laser fire streaked across the void, striking the Wanderer with deadly precision. The ship shuddered, systems faltered, and alarms screamed. Amid the chaos, Kari felt a surge of determination. Clutching the memory shard, she stood beside Jonas, ready to fight not just for survival, but for the legacy held within her mind. The battle was not just theirs, it was a war for truth, memory, and freedom. As the drones closed in, Jonas looked at Kari and nodded. "Hold on tight. This is just the beginning."